I have finished working on the beam up there, so I'm going to take you up to the ladder and talk about what I've done and what my plan is for blocking and strapping, for weight distribution, for hurricane force winds, and for earthquake or a seismic activity. So let's head up there and I'll show you. On the top here, we have a 2x8 board that goes all the way down the length of the beam on both sides, and it's acting as a ledger board. So these rafters are sitting with a bird's mouth cut on the top of the beam, and that's about 1 3/4 inch, but I wanted additional support for the rafters, and so I put this ledger board up, so we have another 1.5 inch of weight bearing. With the ledger board, I used 2 structural screws under each rafter, every rafter, and each of these structural screws are rated for, I think, 800 to 1,000 pounds. On this side of the beam, I also put in 2 additional structural lag screws to bond the 2 LVL beams together, because there's one here and there's one over there. And I did that under every rafter on this side to ensure that I had at least that bonding every 16 inches as required by code. You'll also see that I have some vertical 2x4s. I don't have a lot of those, but I have a few of those on both sides of the beam throughout the length of it. And what that's doing is that is blocking some of the old rafters that are still in use to make sure that they are basically bearing down weight onto the beam, and that weight is being carried by these lag screws. And for the ones that don't have, for the old rafters, such as this one here, that doesn't have blocking, I'll be putting a smaller block from the bottom, or sorry, from the top of the ledger to the bottom of the rafter, similar to this here. Basically, it'll be that length right there. And so every rafter, both new and old, will be bearing its weight directly on the beam. This 2x4 that's at the bottom here is, and actually all of the lumber that's on the side of it here, is to make the beam wider, so when I put the finished work on it, whether that's drywall or tongue and groove boards or whatever we're going to do to finish off the beam for a good look, the beam will be wider to be a little bit more in line with how long and how tall the beam is. So it just needed a bulkier look to it. In addition to the blocking that I just talked about, every rafter, all the new ones and the old ones, they will be tied together with a metal strap that'll be acting as a collar tie. It'll be a 24-inch strap that will go from one side of the beam to the other side of the beam, or one rafter to the other rafter, and screwed into place. It's a Simpson Strong Tie product, and it's meant to bond wood to wood. And the purpose of that, again, is to create a collar tie between each of the rafter sets. That's on the new rafters and the old rafters, because we have removed essentially the collar ties that were in place when we removed the ceiling joists. So that's how blocking and strapping is going to work at the beam. Now let's talk about how I'm going to be securing the new and the old rafters to the wall. So all of the blocking that is talked about, that's in place for downward pressure, downward force on the roof and the walls to help it carry the load, but also not separate or move. What about upward force? During heavy winds, you can actually have the roof ripped off of the building if it's not properly secured. Actually, check out this little video that I watched just the other day. It's pretty crazy stuff. In addition to the downward force, there's upward force, and you want to make sure that all of your lumber stays together. So the roof rafters are sitting on the beam and they're sitting on the top plate, and those need to be bonded together. And typically you would use a hurricane strap, and there's two different types of those. But there's also another product that Simpson Strong Tie has, and it's really just a long screw. It's a truss screw, it's 6 inches long. It is meant to be a direct replacement of the hurricane straps. Cost-wise, I found it a little bit cheaper to go with the screws than it was to buy the strap and all of the screws that that you use on those straps. So let's give these things a try. Let's see how they work, and they should be a lot easier. These two bottom plates are pretty thick. I'll be able to get at least 2 inches of the 6 inches into the rafter. Well, that was easy. Now these two are pretty crooked. I'll see if I can straighten them out a bit. Actually, I think I'm going to get a longer. There we go. That's pretty good. All right, so I think I have to go at an angle on this one. Did that help at all? It helped a little bit. Those look better. Did they come out the back at all? No. Yeah, them are sturdy. Them are sturdy. All right, so similar to securing the rafters to the top plate, you also need to secure the studs to the top plate, and actually the stud to the bottom plate also. So they make a 4.5 inch version of the same thing for stud to top plate, and I think I'm going to be using the adapter on this one. Let's see here. Let's get it started straight ahead, and then bend it down. There we go. It's in there, and it didn't penetrate through the other side. I'll show you here. All right, so there's where it entered in, and over here, just that little bit right there, but it went straight up into the top plate. So now this wall stud is secured to the top plate. Yeah, so these things are pretty cool. This is the 6 inch version, 4.5 inch version. Both of them come with these adapter plates to get you the right angle of entry. Yeah, pretty neat. So I'm gonna continue that. There's no reason for me to do that on camera. I think there's like 200 or so that I'm putting in place. So I'll do that off camera. So in addition to furring out and putting the ledger board on the beam, you can see in the corner back there, I've started a small project of putting a mini split in here just temporarily. That's ongoing. That'll be a different video. I'm waiting on some parts to arrive, a tool that I thought I didn't need, but I needed. Now, in addition to that, what you're looking at here is the north wall. I reframed this. So this is now a brand new wall, and it goes from a new bottom plate that we put in to the new rafters that we put in. And we did this for a couple reasons. Well, really, this beam that's in place, it requires at least a 5.5 inch bearing on a bearing post. And the top plate of the original wall was only 3.5 inches, maybe 4 inches. And we needed to bump out the bearing post a little bit farther. So I said, why don't we just reframe this wall to make it square with the new west wall that we put in, and to make it plumb. But it just made it so we could hide this additional amount of bearing that we needed to put in. This additional post we would have had to put in just to have the 5.25 or 5.5 inch of bearing space at the bottom of where the beam rested. And I didn't want to have that out, so we just reframed this. And you will see that I reframed it over this window. This window is actually coming out when I convert that north porch into a bedroom. That's a future project. So for now, this north wall here has been reframed to make it square, plumb, straight, and look really nice when it's done. So continuing on with the bearing. So the beam needs to rest on at least 5.5 inches of wood. On the south wall, again, we have about 3.5 inches that it's currently bearing on. So unfortunately, I do need to come out another 1.5 inches, 2 inches. So I'll be putting some more 2x4s from the bottom all the way down to the floor. So there'll be a little bit of a bump out right here at the door. So the kitchen cabinets will kind of butt up right next to it. So it won't really be that big of a deal. I'm okay with that one. And then to make sure that the drywallers have a place to continue their drywall all the way up to the ceiling line, I put in additional studs, 16 on center, above the top plate to the back side of the rafter. All right, let's head up and I'll show you an example of how this is gonna look when it's all done. Still working out a couple of the logistics of things, but I tried to use one of those truss screws to bond this rafter to the beam. I didn't like how much, it just didn't grab enough of the rafter. So I think I'm gonna scrap that idea. Here's an example of the strap going across two rafters, acting basically as a collar tie. I have the same thing going on this rafter on this side here. And then I also have hurricane straps going from the beam to the rafter. So now what I need to do is put blocking. Okay, so now the last thing to do is to put a hurricane strap from this rafter to the beam. And these 6-inch hurricane straps are a little bit too short, so I'm waiting on some 8-inch hurricane straps. It'll essentially go from here to the side of the rafter. I was able to finish putting all of those truss screws in the rafter to the top plate, the stud to the top plate, and the stud to the bottom plate, except for in this area here, because I don't have access to the studs, and I wasn't able to go from underneath to the rafter. So I'm actually just going to use standard hurricane straps for this and go from face of the bottom plate to the side of the rafter, just like that. So that concludes how I'm doing blocking and strapping for weight bearing, for high winds, and for seismic activity. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you later. Bye.